Okay, my topic for this afternoon is meeting the challenges of food and nutrition security. I think for most of us, we're quite familiar with the definition of food security as saying that food security is just really the availability, accessibility of food at all times on every households. But it's no longer the definition right now. Food security now carries this definition. Okay. Okay, food security by FAO and I think by WHO also said so that food security exists when all people at all times have physical or economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. And this explains why, from that the simple term food security, there is now the addition of nutrition security. In the sense that, we will say that food should not only be made available on every table, or family's table or household, but it should be safe and nutritious as well. We nutritionists would always say, or even we agriculturists or food technologists would say, what good is a food? Now, if it has reached the table, it would not contain any nutrients at all. To remember that the nutrients are those chemical components of food that would, of course, do or perform some physiologic functions in the human body for us to be healthy and strong. Okay. Let me just give you an overview of the current state of malnutrition. Okay, and we say that 11 million children die before reaching the age of 5. Okay. And of these, 60 of these children die, from malnutrition or lack of food. Quite deplorable, right? Because malnutrition, as all of us would know, is something that there is a solution. Okay, so you see, children dying of malnutrition is actually a moral issue. In 2010, an estimated of 9.5 million people were undernourished. Okay. And you see, based on the data, right now, as I will show later, especially in the Philippines, not much have really changed, from that figure. Okay, and again, paradigm or the principal philosophy behind malnutrition is that as long as there is poverty, of course, when there's poverty, there is insufficient food, and there is hunger. When there is hunger, there is malnutrition, right? Okay, I would add more on that to say insufficient food, not only insufficient food, because when you talk about sufficient food, that is insufficient food or insufficiency, that only talks about production availability. But this time, I would like to input more, as I said, not only availability of food, but also, as I said, insufficiency of food, but as well as that of the lack of quality of available foods, and of course, that is the lack of nutrients, or diversity of nutrients in the diet, or in the food that we are eating. Okay, let me just simply present you. I've seen one or two slides of Dr. Bruce Tolentino stating about the nutritional status of the Filipinos. So let me just briefly run down on the nutritional status of the Filipinos. This is based on 2011. Okay, right? Okay, 2011. Okay, data by our very own Food and Nutrition Research Institute, who does the National Nutrition Survey every 5 years. No? But last year we had an intervening survey. Okay, instead of doing it now, 2013, we did it last 2011. I will include some of those data in my presentation. Okay, I think in all developing countries, we almost would have the same, malnutrition status or nutritional status of our population. Only we vary, there is only varying degree. But we almost would have that. We still have, as okay, exhibited in a lot of developing countries. Still, the two major forms of malnutrition would be that of the protein energy malnutrition and the, okay, micronutrient, okay, malnutrition. Okay, this is Philippines. Okay, this is the trends in the prevalence of underweight for age among children. So that means, okay, the lack of weight, not sufficient weight for one's age. Under 5 years old, that is 0 to less than 60 months. And it shows, take a look that, okay, so as you go now from 1989, take a look that really not much change has been made. Like for example, from the year 22, okay, down to 24, 28, and that of 2011, there is not really much a significant difference, okay, or improvement in the, okay, underweight for age status of children, okay. And just imagine, remember, I hope you're also very familiar with the goal of the MDG, that as much as possible, we should have reduced, okay, hunger and poverty by half by 2015. Okay, and of course, as I said, malnutrition is associated with hunger and poverty. We also would hope that by 2015, our prevalence of malnutrition would also be, okay, half. But take note that we don't have really much time if the target is 2015. Right now, 2013, we're still about 22.2%. Okay, we should have brought it down, or we should be bringing it down up to 13.6%. And this just simply implies that, is there really food on the table? Okay, in spite of the many strategies, okay, and tactics that we're doing to make food available in every, households. Yet, okay, we find, okay, especially in the Philippines, this data. Still, there is a not significant improvement in nutritional status. So the prevalence of malnourished children of 0 to 5 years old in the Philippines, take a look. I'm sorry, I don't have my pointer. Okay, much for, like for example, okay, so from 2003 to 2011, look, 20.7 to 20.2. Not much of a statistically, okay, significant change. 30.8 to 33.6, that is from 2003 to 2011. Okay, that is for stunting. Okay, stunting is of course short for one's age, right? Short for one's age. And of course, we have wasting. Okay, this is 6 and about 7.3. There's a little bit of improvement. What is quite deploring is the fact that, okay, right now, our survey would show that aside from undernutrition, there is now an increasing prevalence of overnutrition. Okay, why? No? Why? Maybe that simply goes back again to what you call nutritional insecurity. Maybe we are producing, the diet would consist mostly of what? Of high calories foods. Like maybe people are eating more of calories from the staples, and then all other nutrients, okay, are not present in the, okay, is not present in the diet. Okay, and you know for a fact, from your course, I know you have all undergone some chemistry and biochemistry courses, that when you take in more calories than what is recommended, your daily requirements, then these calories, are converted into fat. And that is why there is overnutrition. Like for example, if the gentleman, the requirement is just simply, like for example, 6 cups of carbohydrates per day, and like for example, that all carbohydrates will come from rice. But to eat 10 or 12 or 15 cups per day of rice, then what happens to the excess calories? Biochemistry, okay, your body will just simply convert that into fat. And that's why, you see, so with mononutrient, the nutrients are already diverse in the diet, then that would result in a state not only undernutrition, but also overnutrition as well. Okay, this is the prevalence of overweight again among children, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, well, of course, these are the regions in the Philippines, but take note, the average is already 4.3. Among children, 0 to 60 months old. Okay? And remember, this is the critical age, for children, of course, growing and developing. And the average, Philippine average, this is national average, is about 4.3. That means about 4 children for every 100. Okay, prevalence against of malnourished children, 5 to 10 years old. Again, take a look. It's not really much improvement. Okay, from 2003, for underweight, you have 32. Again, you see, not significantly different. 36, from 33.6 to stunting, there is quite difference. No? Yes, there's a significant difference. Okay, wasting again, 7.4 to 8.5. And overweight, for height, again, 5.8, so 7.5. So that means really, okay, overweight, okay, is also, okay, the increasing, okay, its prevalence from 2003 to 2008. Again, these are children 5 to 10 years old. Average of overweight would be that of 7.5. So as the child grows older, okay, so okay, there would be 7.5, so about 8 children out of 100, okay, of children in 61 to 125 are overweight. Okay, how about those among the adolescents, 11 to 19 years old? Researchers have shown right now, that the adolescents, what you call the teenagers, 11 to 19 years old, we are no longer adolescents, no, because none of us is below 20 years old. Okay, you see, take a look. The overweight is 4.6, no, and of course, underweight still remains 17. 17 over 100 against 5 over 100 for overweight. So this is still, a big problem. Okay, how about for us? I don't know, the elderly, and usually those, okay, and especially those, this one, okay, and especially those, okay, who are no longer young, So the chronic energy deficiency, we call this chronic energy. If we, as we grow older and older, we really, lack the calories in our diet. And we call that your chronic energy deficiency. Among adults is about 11.6 in 2008. So that is about 12, okay, 12 individuals. Okay, that is of course with CET. Obesity, take a look, 27 out of 100 are obese. Among adults, that could possibly including all of us. Okay, there is a tendency, okay, of increasing in weight. Okay, so the prevalence of overweight and obesity in 2008 has of course significantly increased, okay, as shown in this, okay, figure or in this graph. Okay, how about the nutritionally at-risk pregnant women? We would like to take care of the pregnant women because there is where, okay, the first, it's okay, the pregnant women should be properly nourished because we say that nutrition is from womb to tomb. So you should start with the, okay, pregnant women. And the pregnant women, take a look, by 2011, okay, those that are weight for height, so that should be wasted or thinned. Okay, you have about this, 25 in 2011, okay, in 2008 it's about 20. So there is a improvement of the nutritional status of the pregnant women, as a lot of the government programs focus really on pregnant, lactating, and that of the young children. Okay, a little bit, but you see that is not statistically different again. Okay. How about those underweight and lactating women? Okay, underweight, lactating, these are the ones who are, breastfeeding. We are now right now promoting breastfeeding, from 0 up to 6 months. Totally breast milk fed. Okay, not even water supposedly. Only, and well, if the doctor requires, there would be supplementation. That is the only time we would allow. But as much as possible, the child gets its nourishment, okay, after birth, okay, from 0 to 6, only pure breast milk. It has been established that the breast milk can provide all the necessary nutrients and energy needed by, or calories needed by the child as it grows up. Okay, and so that would be, let's say you take a look, the overweight among lactating women is also increasing. But of course, the underweight there is of course a improvement. Okay, that again, looking into the data, that again brings us, okay, still, okay, even right now, even of the many, as I've said, strategies, nutrition programs the Philippines is incorporated. In fact, we have the National Nutrition Council. It is the coordinating body for the implementation and operation of all nutrition, okay, programs in the Philippines. And of course, the goal is for an nutritionally improved, okay, Philippines. We have that. It is composed of almost all of the government sectors in the Philippines, plus 3 private organizations compose it. So they call it the National Nutrition Council Governing Board. Okay, and it is the policy making, okay, body for the, okay, implementation, operation, okay, of either the midterm goal, the short-term goal, or the long-term goal of the nutrition programs in the Philippines. And still, out of that, you see, still up to now, 25 years ago, we were already have recognized this, that in the Philippines, these are the major problems. And I think this is not only true for the Philippines, but for the whole developing countries worldwide. Still, these are the 2 main forms of malnutrition that are greatly affecting the population. And that's still protein energy malnutrition. When we talk about protein energy malnutrition, that is still the lack of energy. So if you're talking about, for example, staples, that means, okay, the staple is the major source of energy. So if you're talking, like, for example, the Philippines right now, still protein energy malnutrition. If you look at the diet, to do a 24-hour protocol, assess the nutritional intake of the Filipinos, you'll find out that it's still about 33%, okay, deficient in energy or in calories. Okay, and you know for a fact again that the deficiency in energy results in, of course, an underweight, or undernourished, okay, Filipino population. And that holds true for any country, okay, who has PEM as one of its major malnutrition forms. Okay. So, of course, the 2 others are the micronutrient, or what you call the hidden hunger forms of malnutrition. And this is, of course, your vitamin A, iron deficiency anemia, or iodine deficiency disorders. It comes in an acronym for VAD-IDA-ID. And of course, again, as I shown you earlier, there is, of course, an increasing prevalence of obesity and some nutrition-related degenerative diseases, like, of course, it goes overweight, obesity, okay, 100%, okay, the population, if there's increasing prevalence of obesity in the population, of course, okay, there is, of course, an increasing risk of diabetes. And you know for a fact also that there is obesity, there's also an increased risk of the degenerative disorder of CAD or CVD or the cardiovascular diseases. When you talk about CVD, this is the diseases of the heart and all of the blood vessels. Okay. That, like I said, obesity is a risk factor, for all of these, okay, degenerative diseases. Okay. Vitamin A deficiency in the Philippines is also considered severe, For children 6 to 5 years old, that's about 8.2, and for pregnant women, that is 7.1. It is quite alarming, And that's the reason why we are so fortunate that some of the breeders, some of the aquaculturists are now trying to improve the nutrient density in the, in crop production. Okay, later on, I will talk about that as I present to you what we think, okay, as nutritionists in the Institute of Human Nutrition and Food, as the whole group, as regards how do we, let's say, make all these food security, okay, strategies and tactics nutrition sensitive. Okay. Again, just how the interrelationships of food security and that of nutrition security. Of course, you talk about food security, availability of food, acceptability, accessibility, affordability, safety, and you know that all goes into the diet. We say that we all have enough food on the table, and then we simply would say, okay, that we are food insecure. But when you talk about nutrition security, food may be available on the table, but if the nutrients are lacking, okay, and if the people are eating a diet that is not diverse in nutrients, so that could result, okay, in either undernutrition, malnutrition, overnutrition, or that could even result into not only PEM or protein energy malnutrition, but also that hidden hunger or the micronutrient malnutrition. As the diet, as I said, affects the nutrition status as well as that of health and care. So actually, how do we meet all these challenges? Okay, as far as we would say, let's look, how does really food reach the table? That is food security, right? The food, okay, must reach the table. I think the problem with that, if you look at this, okay, actually this is theoretically, it starts from where? Okay, so you have food production. Okay, food production, then the food that produces enough food, okay, there is availability, okay, then you do a lot of post-harvest handling, okay, market preparation, distribute it, okay, either wholesale, okay, or you process it, and the all goes to the retail market into the consumers. Food consumption, that is food security. But when you talk about nutrient utilization of the food that we eat, that is nutritional security. Because food may have reached the table, but if it's not diverse in nutrients, okay, then that would result in nutritional security. Just like, of course, so seemingly, that would mean a lack of, or that would mean a condition of, okay, nutrient inadequacy in the diet. And that would eventually lead to what we call nutrition insecurity. Okay. Balik na. Okay. Balik dun sa okay. So, you see, so how do we say, come up with the end goal that when people eat the food, okay, now when it is nutrient dense, also there is a diversity of foods. Okay, likewise, if you want a diversity of nutrients, okay, then of course food securities must make sure that there is a diversity of foods. Okay. And so what are these? So look, for production, food production, what do we do? Of course, agriculturists, farmers should produce more food. Okay, and that's why when we talk about food, of course, that should be a staple. And we're lucky if we have ERI or some of these institutions that really works on, okay, having, like, for example, for the Philippines, to be, let's say, caloric sufficient in our diet. Of course, we have to take in a lot. We should have enough of the staple, okay, to reach the table. Okay, that is food security. But how about when we talk about nutrition security? Look at all the staples. They are only, okay, primarily, the endosperm is primarily starch, and that would only give, okay, carbohydrates. And that is, of course, a good source of energy. Okay. So, that is a source of energy. But it would not, if we just eat alone rice, okay, then for sure, okay, we could have, of course, a lot of the micronutrient, okay, malnutrition. We could have a lot of other nutrient, okay, inadequacy, like the vitamins and the minerals. So what could we do, right? We are now in the right track. Okay, you have your biofortification, biotechnology, genetic engineering, GMO, producing. Okay, so what happens that the purpose for that is not only increasing yield, but also in improving the quality of the staples. Okay, so when you eat the staple, it is not only carbohydrates, not only energy that we get, but also all other micronutrients. Especially, it's either, it could be vitamin A in there, it could be, of course, there should be also like maybe iodine, okay, or maybe that of iron in the rice that we are eating. And I think a lot of researches is already being done. And that will be soon, they said in 2 years, they will be coming up already with the release of the golden, okay, rice. And exactly that, what's that? That is of course an improvement. I told you not vitamin A is not found in cereals. So of course, you know, the principle of, you know, of biotechnology, so they are able now to input, okay, the carotenoids, the beta carotene into the, okay, structure or molecular structure into the genes of the rice, and now they produce, okay, they produce no longer white rice but yellow rice, indicative that there is carotenoids now in there. So because rice is like rice and all other like rice, of course, is a common cereals for most of us, or staples for most of us, then vitamin A, okay, in rice could possibly solve, okay, the micro-malnutrition deficiency in vitamin A, or what you call the hidden hunger. So there it is, biofortification, aside from just improving yield, increase resistance in pests, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's try to be more nutrition sensitive. What is really there that the nutritional status would tell us what quality of staples should be produced. Okay, right now, the Science State University, VSU, produced this kind of taro. It's really very, very violent. We analyze it and it's quite high with what you call the phytochemicals. The phytochemicals are those components in foods which have health beneficial effects. So it could have, like you see, when you talk about health beneficial effects, it could have this anti-cancer, glucose lowering ability, cholesterol lowering ability, and so on and so forth. Good for the heart, and so on and so forth. And we found that it is very high in anthocyanins. And you know that anthocyanins, a phytochemical, which said that could help, okay, let's say, increase resistance, or you call this of people having the risk of having cancer, because it's very high in anthocyanins. One more amazing with that, when we look at it, so more of the root crops, it is quite high in zinc and iron. So possibly we thought of, now, again, I don't know if it's possible for breeding or biotechnology, you know, to get that, you know, what's in there, the genes or the proteins in there, possibly the enzyme, and incorporate it into rice, and then you end up no longer, possibly not only yellow rice, so you end up with a violet rice, which is of course also common right now because we also have pigmented rice. But that indicates with this high in iron and that of, okay, zinc. You know that zinc nowadays, okay, is quite important to be, you know, increased in the, it should be increased or present in the diet, because the zinc has been found to help in the strengthening the immune system as well as for growth and development. And that could solve the stunting, okay, prevalence, the high stunting prevalence of the Filipinos, as well as all countries. Cambodia, Indochina, you know, Laos and Vietnam has a very high rate of, okay, that's a very high rate of stunting. And you know what they did? Okay, with their food production, okay, they go into traditional food. You know, there's small fishes. It's always you can always have in there. As long as there is water, there is fish, and it's quite high in iron. So now they are trying to incorporate that in the diet of the, you know, especially that of the Cambodians. And then they also try to incorporate the eating of spiders. No, the Cambodians, they eat spiders. No, because the spiders, you know, the spiders, the one with 8 legs, the crawls, yeah. Okay, it's not of course the tarantula, I'm sure. Okay, that's it. It will be poisonous. But it's a kind of vegetable spider which is very, very high in zinc. Oh, so you incorporate that again, possibly, in the food that we eat. Okay, production, so what happens that, I think Cambodia, I think they produce a lot of spiders in their production. So that's it. What we're just trying to imply is that long as you know, all breeders, all agriculturists, all of course food processor, they just become nutrition sensitive. Okay, and of course, when we say nutrition sensitive, what could be the predominating malnutrition status or conditions of the Philippines? Of course, we want also as much as possible, we don't have one study, okay? Post-harvest losses, we could have produced much available production, no supply. But you know, post-harvest losses, you know, in the post-harvest training research center in the Philippines, they show that. Okay, in vegetable, it could go as high as 55%, in fruits as high as 45%. Just imagine, okay, in terms of food security, no more than half of the biomass of what should have been taken in is simply, losses, all post-harvest losses. Because of the, improper handling of foods, they would get spoiled along the way from the farm down to the market, from the market down to the table. And that would also reduce the nutritional nutrient density in food. Because of course, when the food is spoiled, okay, it goes with it the nutrients. But you saw with also with improper handling. Like for example, you transport, like for example, carrots, which supposedly should be high in vitamin A, or let's say fruits high in vitamin C, or any vegetables high in B vitamins. We know that these are, of course, heat sensitive. And during transport, you pack them so that per transport, okay, it will be a lot cheaper, and so you build up heat. But in the process, of course, the food spoiled, especially the fresh vegetable, they get spoiled, and at the same time, the nutrients are lost. So either, of course, oxidation or evaporation, and so on and so forth. Because the vitamin C, the B vitamins, they are heat labile. No, that means they get easily destroyed by it. So we would, of course, as much as possible, again, improve a lot of the post-harvest handling practice. Of course, one is to increase biomass, okay, of the food, okay, or to preserve the food, such that from the farmer, when it reaches us, then there is still more. So no losses, no post-harvest losses, as well as that of no nutrient losses. Again, you see, at this point, for example, in processing, when we process food, our main intention is just simply what? Safety. To destroy microorganisms. And in doing that, to make the food safety, we could have possibly reduce, okay, all that necessary nutrients, okay, that would be, like for example, vitamin C and B vitamins. With processing, you turn foods. So it's just to be, as I said, nutrition sensitive. We should now try to find out how to conserve. As we go from farm, okay, down to the market preparation, down to, okay, processing, okay, should be nutrition sensitive. Okay, would you want to eat, like for example, a canned vegetable, okay, with almost no nutrients at all except fibers, because that's the only thing that could not easily be affected by it. Or a canned fruit, wherein it contains just simply the pulp, but no nutrients at all. No, it may be nice tasting, it may be safe for human consumption, but of course the nutrients are lacking. So, but of course, government now is doing, they say, this fortification, this biofortification. Like for example, salt. What they're doing now is they're fortifying our salt with iodine. Okay, some countries it is mandatory. The Philippines, it is mandatory. But yet when you look at the National Nutrition Survey, still, okay, there's still a prevalence of iodine deficiency or IDD disorder. So somewhere along the implementation, there could be problems. We may be doing, we may be the food and nutrition experts, okay, may be doing, implementing, okay, the right thing. But you see, at the practice, okay, there could be, okay, there could be something, okay, that went wrong. Okay, so that's it, and then down to the retail market, and of course you have the consumers. You know, what consumers? Because you see, cooking, food can have reached the table, but just know, households should be taught on how to prepare the food such that nutrients are conserved. Like for example, when you want to cook rice, cook rice, right now we are promoting brown rice. Brown rice is simply, you just remove the hull, right? Okay, to retain the bran. No, to retain the bran. Brown rice is not pigmented rice. Remember, there is a type of rice that is colored. Okay, brown rice is just simply whether pigmented or not pigmented, you remove the hull, so it retains the bran. And the bran contains all the nutrients. And that's why milled rice, not the white rice that we are eating, almost all the nutrients are lost. Because it's in there, in the bran, in the iron layer, those are lost during milling. And what is just left is the endosperm, which has contained, primarily just starch or just carbohydrates. So just imagine, you have the brown rice. Okay, breeders or even processors, some people produce to you brown rice. And then what do? When you wash it, you wash it how many times? Okay, you wash as if you are washing clothes. No? And so what happens to your water-soluble vitamins, especially the B vitamins? Of course, there's no vitamin C in rice. Don't they say that there is vitamin C in pigmented rice, not the colored rice? Okay, but not in the non-pigmented rice. So you wash it, many times. Okay, about 70% already of the B vitamins is lost because it is water soluble. And that's why the recommendation should be, as much as possible, you wash your rice only once. And if you are still, that your rice is clean, then you can use that rice washing to prepare again the foods. Okay. And of course, the vitamins is sensitive. So you wash it many times, 70% is lost, and then you heat it up. So what happens? So even your brown rice no longer would contain the much needed B vitamins. So food preparation, proper techniques of preparing food should also be taught to conserve the nutrients, and that would help in what we say attaining what you call nutrition security. Okay. Of course, this is at the household level. Okay. For example, so how do you prepare foods again? Fruits and vegetables. Okay, you must wash first. You must wash first. Okay, before paring, before peeling, before cutting. Because if you do that, then what happens? You increase the surface area for nutrient loss, especially again, okay, B vitamins and that of vitamin C. These are the more sensitive B vitamins. Okay. Yung cooking, what do? You also have to cook it well. Do not cook it like, for example, a very, very high temperature. Like, for example, you're cooking meat dishes. Don't cook it in a very high temperature because you are in a hurry. You should cook moderately heat temperature because with this cooking, what happens to your proteins? It toughens. And when it toughens, you see, when it toughens, what happens when you digest it? Okay, you lose a lot of it. It's no longer digestible. Okay, or it's hard to digest. When it's hard to digest, remember, the proteins, the amino acids that are absorbed by the body are not released. Okay, so there goes again. It could add up to what you call nutrition insecurity. Okay, so the nutrients, okay, are not made available for use by the body to perform specific functions. Okay, some tips only on how to conserve nutrients. So you see, the challenges on nutrition security, okay, it's not easy. It is quite easy to do, provided only, okay, the target or population groups are informed. Okay, and of course, for those who are involved in food production, of course, what we do hope is that they simply become nutrition sensitive. Okay, what is actually the people are needing? It may not, as I said, it may not only, okay, just simply high production of food, but when it reaches the table, still the nutrients supposedly contained in that food is, okay, available. And I think some of our countries are doing it. I'm not quite sure it is Bangladesh who's doing already iodine fortification of salt. mandatory 100%. Okay. In the Philippines, we have a vitamin A for flour and sugar. Okay. We tried doing iron and iodine in rice, but it did not work. People would not want to eat it because usually by food behavior, when we talk about rice, it should be white. And anything you offer to the consumer, even the poorest of the poor, if they see, okay, that the rice that they would buy, put money into it, not unless you give them for free, but if they're going to buy it, they would not buy rice that is black in color. And so when you, like for example, when you incorporate, okay, like for example, like, let's say 45 rice with iron or iodine, okay, it turns, dark in color. Oh my goodness. We've tried that. It did not work. Now we're trying again, simply because nowadays, if you want to introduce, okay, a type of a new kind of food, like a black rice, then you must, of course, first try to get rid of the negative, okay, impression that is associated with the food. Right now, we're doing, breeding. The stunting is a main problem. So, the Institute of Plant Breeding produces a type of corn. I think this is already, you call the quality protein maize, which is high in lysine and tryptophan. So the same energy when you eat a cup of rice, cooked rice, and a cup of corn, same energy is delivered. But one thing about with this corn is that it has lysine and tryptophan, which are the two limiting amino acids in most cereals, especially rice. And lysine and tryptophan are involved in growth and development. So this is what you call not already the germplasm or the GMO, but this is what we call the natural, fortification of food. You have one type of food that is high in nutrients, then you just simply mix that or include that in the diet. And of course, you get a diversity of nutrients in the food. So primarily, it's really producing foods, okay, make it available, not only one type of food, one type of crop, but of course, generally, okay, a diverse, diversity in food items make available, because with the diversity of food items, then of course, that settles now also the diversity, or that also would result into the diversity of nutrients in the diet. I was challenging the animal production people. I was telling them, why don't you feed your animals with corn, this quality protein maize, so that there will be lysine and tryptophan, okay? And then, then people eat proteins with a higher number of lysine and tryptophan. I don't know. When we talk about functional foods, they said, why don't you feed, like for example, your chickens with a lot of chilies and a lot of other food items that has a health beneficial effect, like cholesterol lowering effect, such that the egg that we are eating, which is high in cholesterol, would be, it would be reduced in its amount. Okay, just simply feeding, through feeding. Just like when we treat people, we do not want the cholesterol to be built up, then don't eat, do not eat, or eat in moderation foods that are high in cholesterol. Okay, class. Okay, I'm used to not class, no, but of course, you see, in nutrition, we always would say eat in moderation, no? Okay, eat in moderation. That is so. That means that we should eat a variety of foods. Okay, so that we make sure that not only food security is attained, but also nutrition security is attained. Thank you very much for